In the heart of the city, nestled between towering skyscrapers and bustling streets, there was a house. The house stood alone, a silent witness to the secrets it held within its walls. It had stood there for generations, its history as rich and complex as the wood that framed its windows. He was the last remnant of a bygone era, a living memory of a time when the city was young, but he remained in his room, untouched by the march of progress, a prisoner of his own past. The people who knew about him whispered tales of his eccentricities, of how he spoke to the shadows on the wall as if they were old friends, and how he hummed tunes from a forgotten age. And the buildings that scraped the sky were just dreams in the minds of ambitious men. But now, with the room's door shut, they seemed alien, menacing, stretching and coiling like living things. They danced in the faint moonlight that filtered through the grimy windows, turning the familiar hallway into a spooky, unfamiliar landscape. His parents, once prominent figures in society, had passed away years ago, leaving him the sole inheritor of their sprawling mansion. He turned to go back, but his hand found only cold, unyielding wood where the door had been. It was as if the house itself was keeping him here, holding him captive in this macabre game. As he stepped out into the hallway, the door shut behind him with a finality that made him jump. He didn't want to see what might be lurking in the shadows there, what might have been hiding in the dark corners of his mind for all these years. He was met with a sight that was both strange and familiar, the shadows. The creature was silent, yet its presence seemed to echo in his ears, its laughter ringing in his bones. A figure began to emerge from the darkness, tall and gaunt, with eyes that glowed like embers in the gloom. He just needed to get away from the creature, to escape the nightmare that had materialized from the shadows. The fresh air hit him like a wave, bringing with it the sounds of the city, the distant hum of traffic, the murmur of voices, the laughter of children. He surged forward, hope surging through him. Maybe it was just a trick of the light, maybe it wasn't real, but he didn't care. The alone boy froze, his breath catching in his throat as the creature took a step forward. With each step, the shadows seemed to grow, reaching out to him like grasping claws. He looked back at the house, its silhouette stark against the night sky, and he saw it, a mocking grin carved into the shape of a window. The once opulent space was now a tomb of memories, choked with cobwebs and shrouded in an oppressive silence. The creature was still out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for him to make a move. They were a part of him now, a part of his story. "You can't hide from us," it hissed. "You can't escape us." Where could he go? Where could he hide from the shadows? He looked around, but there was nothing there, no one there. Just the trees swaying in the wind, and the birds chirping merrily in the branches. He was tired, hungry, thirsty, but he didn't stop. People were already starting to gather outside, sipping their coffee and chatting about their day ahead. He couldn't stop. Not for anything. Not for anyone. He didn't know where he was going, but he knew he had to keep moving. He had to keep running from the shadows. He was the alone boy who lived in the house of shadows, and those shadows would follow him for the rest of his life. Maybe it wasn't as powerful outside the house. Maybe it wouldn't follow him here. A single shaft of moonlight cut through the gloom, illuminating swirling dust particles and revealing the full extent of the shadows that had taken root in this place. As he ate, he kept glancing at the door, half expecting the creature to stride in at any moment, its eyes blazing with fury, its lips curled in a triumphant sneer. And some nightmares don't end, they follow you. In the end, the need for food won out and he walked into the cafe. Its face was obscured by the shadows, but he could sense its malevolent intent, the predatory gleam in its eyes, the cruel curve of its lips. They were always there, clinging to him, whispering in his ear, reminding him of his solitude. He looked up and saw a dark figure standing at his table. He scrambled back, knocking over his coffee, but the figure was already upon him, its eyes boring into his. He could feel their icy touch on his skin, their whispers brushing against his ears, sending shivers down his spine. But tonight, the house wasn't just a historical landmark. Tonight, it was a prison. They were too busy with their lives, too engrossed in their own stories. No one saw the terror on his face. No one heard the plea in his scream. He was surrounded, engulfed by an army of darkness that seemed to be closing in on him, suffocating him with their sheer numbers. He was exhausted, defeated. He slumped over, burying his face in his hands, and let out a sob that echoed in the stillness of the morning. Inside one of the rooms on the top floor lived a boy. He wasn't any ordinary boy. He was known as the Alone Boy. The moniker was given to him not because he was an only child, but because he was always alone. He spent his days locked away in his room, his only companions, the dust motes dancing in the sunbeams that dared penetrate the gloom, and the shadows that stretched and grew as the sun dipped below the horizon. The Alone Boy, who had spent so many nights staring at the darkness, had finally had enough. He wanted to see what was beyond the confines of his room, what the world he'd heard so much about looked like. He wasn't shunned by society out of malice or neglect, but simply because of the nature of his existence. As the years rolled by, the city had grown and changed around him, but tonight was different. Tonight, as the clock struck midnight, something in the house shifted. With trembling hands, he unlocked the door, each creak of the old wooden frame echoing the beat of his frightened heart. For years, he'd only seen them from afar, fleeting glimpses at the edge of his vision. He felt a sudden surge of panic. What was he doing? Why had he come out of his room? Suddenly, he felt a presence behind him, a feeling of being watched. He dared not turn around. Fear propelled him forward, pushing him down the hallway and towards the stairs. At the bottom of the stairs, he found himself in the grand foyer of the house. They were everywhere, in every corner, on every wall, in every crack and crevice. And then he saw it, a flicker of movement in the shadows, something shifting, taking shape. It moved with an eerie grace, gliding across the floor as if weightless. Driven by a primal fear, the Alone Boy turned and fled, racing through the labyrinthine corridors of his own home. He ran blindly, not knowing where he was going, not caring. Then he saw a light ahead, a beacon in the darkness. He burst through the door and into the night, gasping for breath as he stumbled onto the street. For the first time in what felt like forever, he was outside, under the open sky, surrounded by the comforting chaos of the world. He shuddered, realizing that he wasn't safe. Not really. He had escaped the house, but he couldn't escape the shadows. He tried to shake them off, to outrun them, but it was no use. He walked for hours, his feet pounding the pavement, his mind racing. He just kept walking, driven by the primal fear of what would happen if he stopped, if he let the shadows catch up to him. As dawn began to break, he found himself in a park, sitting on a bench under the skeletal branches of a dead tree. And then he heard it, a whisper, soft at first, then growing louder until it was a scream in his ear. He jumped up, his heart pounding. Was it the creature? Had it followed him all this way? But he knew it was there, lurking in the shadows, watching him, waiting for him to make a move. He stood up, his legs shaking, and started to walk away. As he walked, he noticed a small cafe up ahead, its windows fogged up with steam, its awning a cheerful red in the morning light. He hesitated, torn between the desire for anonymity and the need for sustenance. He sat down at a table and ordered a coffee and a sandwich. But it never came. And as the minutes ticked by, he relaxed a little. But then he felt it again, the icy touch of the shadows, the whisper in his ear. "You can't hide from us," it hissed, its voice a venomous whisper. You can't escape us." He screamed, but no one in the cafe seemed to notice. The alone boy who had lived in the House of Shadows for so long, who had thought he could outrun his past, who had hoped for a new beginning, was being dragged back into the darkness. And as the shadows closed in around him, he realized that some monsters aren't born, they're made.